We've been just sitting on more than $20,000 in used gear. It was stuff that we tried out for our video productions here or for still photography. First world problem, but our gear vault was simply full. We were faced with selling more than 100 items used, and it was like an insurmountable feat. Here's why. You go on eBay, but on eBay we've lost thousands of dollars thanks to scammers. On top of that, eBay ends up charging you a lot of fees. So what else? You can go to Facebook groups, but there you're gonna get a bunch of questions from people who never actually end up buying it, or they buy it but then they get it and it wasn't what they thought because they don't actually know what they're doing. Or use something like Craigslist. People pass off counterfeit money and just run off with your stuff. We got tired of it. I have a friend who's been using KEH for the longest time to buy and sell used gear. They made it really easy for me. I just sent them a list and they sent me back a fair price. So after this was all settled, I asked them if they wanted to do a sponsored video because it seemed like a really good service that people could benefit from. Maybe you have stuff that's just sitting around that you want to unload easy without dealing with the hassle, or maybe you want to buy some of our used gear at a really good price. I'm going to go through these more than 100 items and give you a quick mini review. I'm going to say that lenses aren't sharp. Things like that, they are subjective and relative. Some of you will have some of the gear that I've decided to get rid of. If it's working for you, great, enjoy it, keep using it. Let's start with the Micro Four Thirds gear. Sorry, KEH. We are selling our GH5s. You know why? Because they can't do this. They can't do the nice focus pulling. The video quality from them is fantastic, and we have loved 4K 60 for years. We cannot do it with the Canon EOS R that I'm shooting on now, but you know what I can't do with this? Get my face reliably in focus. Here are some of the lenses, the 14-140. This has been our go-to lens for years with the GH5. It's just a fantastic all-around video lens. This is the SLR Magic 25mm. I never liked this lens. We bought this lens to use it in the studio on our Micro Four Thirds cameras, and it was not sharp. Also, it was manual focus only and way overpriced for what is essentially a 50mm f1.8. The Panasonic 12-35 f2.8. We bought this when we switched to Micro Four Thirds with our GH4s, and at the time I really didn't understand crop factor, and I thought it was going to be like a 24-70 f2.8 that we'd been shooting with on full frame, and then I realized it did way worse in low light and it had way less background blur, and then I made those crop factor videos. Also, it didn't compare at all to the amount of sharpness that I was getting out of those full frame lenses, and that's kind of what you get. This is Micro Four Thirds, the 12mm f2.0, so that would be equivalent to a 24mm f4 lens, and it's okay, but again, compare it to a full frame lens and I just wasn't getting the same sharpness out of it. This is the Olympus 7-14mm f2.8 Pro, and it is actually a really good lens, a super wide 14mm equivalent lens. The Olympus 30mm f2.8, I bought this for use in our studio. I compared it to the Sigma 18-35 f1.8 with a speed booster on it, and it was not nearly as sharp. I'm sitting down for this. This is the Olympus 75mm f1.8, stellar lens, an incredible portrait lens, but it's really long at 150mm equivalent, and I usually like to be at 85mm, but nonetheless, that lens was extremely sharp. Got a real Jenga situation going on here. This is the Olympus 40-150 f2.8. It's a good lens, but the Olympus cameras didn't end up being like fast focusing enough to really make good use of it. Another Olympus lens, the 12-40mm f2.8. We actually have two of these for some reason. They're good lenses for Micro Four Thirds, good general lenses, but they don't compare in sharpness to the full frame competitors. Here's the Olympus 17mm f1.2. It sounds really sexy, f1.2, but it's 34mm f2.4, which was good. It's good for a prime lens. It is very sharp. Our second GH5 body. Here's the Olympus EM1 Mark II. You know, I really like this camera, and the photos out of it could be really sharp, but it was still low res, and the focusing never really matched comparable DSLRs or Sony mirrorless cameras, so it just kind of fell in that in-between space. This is our EM10, and oh, I love this camera so much. This was just our travel camera for the longest time, but now we have full-frame mirrorless cameras that are only a little bit bigger and way more functional. This is the original Olympus EM1, another great camera. I never fell in love with it like I did the EM10 because though it had more features, it was also quite a bit bigger and didn't give me that much more. Even more Micro Four Thirds lenses in the gear closet. The Olympus 40-140 was a sports lens and a portrait lens, but I just didn't get good enough focusing to find it useful. The Olympus 9 to 18 millimeter super wide angle lens has terrible image quality. It is second only to this Olympus 14 to 42 kit lens, which is absolutely appalling. If you're using that, please upgrade to something else. This is the Olympus 12 to 100 millimeter, and this is really an awesome walking around lens. Like, stick that on an EM10, and you've got just a lightweight portable kit that can do just about anything. I really loved that lens, and I hate to see it go. This is the Panasonic 25 millimeter f1.2. What I thought would be a really good prime lens turned out to be not very sharp at all. And Olympus teleconverter, which, well, it worked fine. The Panasonic 20mm pancake lens, f1.7. It's been what I recommended as a walking around lens for the Olympus and Panasonic small mirrorless bodies, and it still is. It's good. This was our macro lens when we shot video. If we needed a close-up shot, the Panasonic 45mm. It's good. It works out fine, but again, the autofocus on those bodies wasn't very good. This is a NAR box, which you can put an SD card in and it will like offload it, but the capacity on it was way too small. It was like 128 gigs or something, and we really need like at least a terabyte. I now have a Western Digital drive, which I think is 2 terabytes. These are USB docks for Sigma and Tamron lenses, which you could use to update the firmware or tune the autofocus, and like what a pain that you even need to do that. Like when you get the manufacturer's lenses, you can do all that by just attaching it to the camera body. Saramonic wireless lav set that I had a lot of hope for. I wanted it because you could put up 2 transmitters and connect it to 1 receiver, and Chelsea and I were always talking on mic at the same time, but they were just flaky. They just were not good enough for professional use. They just kept failing, so we switched to the much more expensive Sony set. We have just a ton of flashes from Phottix and Cactus, something like 14 flashes that we got in and reviewed at some point and used them for a while, but now we switched entirely to the Godox system because they work with our strobes in our studio and flashes, and the wireless system is all radio based. Lots of little flash triggers for all those flashes because I was really into wireless flashes for a while until the Godox came out and I realized I could take my studio strobes with me anywhere. Oh, I'm gonna miss this. Look how cool this Tascam recorder is. It records everything to a flash drive. You can hook it up to your video camera, and it allows you to hook up 4 XLR mics with little levels and stuff. So when we were recording Wanderlust with multiple people, like 4 people on camera at a time, Justin would use that and he could monitor and adjust the levels of everybody. Oh, the Nikon 18 to 55 kit lens. Most kit lenses are garbage, including that one. I mean, it's okay. People get pictures and they're happy with them, but if you put it side by side with a real lens, whoo. This is the Rokinon 24mm f1.4. It's very good, but I just don't use it. We have the Canon 24mm f1.4 that I'm recording this on, and it has autofocus. That doesn't have autofocus, but for its price, if you don't mind manually focusing for things like stars, it's a really good value. Speaking of terrible kit lenses, the Canon 18 to 55, fine. It's fine as your first lens. It's fine. Oh my god, I took so many landscape and star shots with this Sigma 17 to 35 f2.8 to f4. Look how messed up that front element is. You could see I had filters on there and then the filters dropped, and rather than protecting the lens, they actually completely messed it up. And there's dust on the outside, but there's also dust on the inside. These old Sigma lenses were built so poorly. Like the moment you took it out of the box, they just started collecting dust, and the dust was so bad you can definitely see it inside the lens. So I probably won't get a lot of money for that. Oh, the same thing with this Rokinon fisheye lens. And I was so excited to have a fisheye at first, and it really did inspire some creativity from me, but I don't use it very much because it's just an unnatural effect. We have a couple of Pentax lenses, but I now believe Pentax is done. Sorry, Pentax fans. We have a couple of SLR teleconverters here, the third-party teleconverters. They're fine, they work okay, but I really do get better results from the name brand teleconverters. Those are less expensive, but they really do add flaring and reduce sharpness in a way that I was able to measure when I did tests. This is the Sony 28 to 70 full-frame lens. It's kind of the full-frame kit lens, and it is not a good lens. And this is the Sony 20mm pancake lens, and it's a pancake lens. It's small. It's good at being small, but it's not something I use often enough. This is the Rokinon 14mm. It's almost a fisheye lens, and if you're looking for a super wide, it's actually pretty good, especially for the price. And for the super wide stuff, manual focus is usually okay. Oh my god, I can't believe Chelsea is getting rid of this tablet. She used this thing for so many years, but now she has one that actually has the video display on it and she loves it, so bye-bye. This is the vertical grip I got to try to fix the terrible grip on the Sony a7R II, and it worked better than the actual Sony one. It's a newer one, not newer, but that is the name brand. And it was cheap and good. If you ever shoot vertically, it might be worth getting one of these knockoff vertical grips. I'll talk about failed experiments. This is a super wide angle lens for my smartphone, but it requires you to use a special case that can mount onto the back, and I used it once and never again. Oh my god, if you have stunning digital photography, this actually makes me a little sad. This is my 150mm macro lens, and it was the first expensive lens that I ever bought, but I don't know if you can see in there. That thing is so filled with dust now. Like I said, these third-party lenses used to be so poorly made that they would suck up dust instantly. And with a macro lens, that's just unforgivable because it does show up in every shot. Sigma has one that's stabilized now, and that would have been really helpful. Oh, this one makes me sad to give up too. This is the Canon 400mm f5.6 prime. We've advertised this for years as being the best just entry-level wildlife lens. It got me so many great pictures that I really love. I'm sad to see this one go, but we've just moved on to bigger lenses now. We have a budget, so we have the big 600 and 500mm lenses. Speaking of just staples of the photography world, the Canon 70-200 f2.8, the previous generation one, we built our stock photography and portrait businesses on this, but now we've moved on to Nikon and Sony for portraits, so it's going. The Canon 50mm f1.4, this was the first experience I really got with background blur. I love that little prime lens. Not very sharp by modern standards, but still it was great. Okay, let's go back to that pile. More stuff. This is the X-H1 and the X-T2 from Fujifilm. They're both good cameras, but I love the X-T3 more, and we don't need multiple Fuji bodies. The Canon 50mm f1.8, still a lens that I recommend to so many people. It should be your second lens. It's a great lens. We have bigger and better stuff. An X-T2 vertical grip. If you'll remember, when the X-T2 came out, it was really limited by features unless you put the vertical grip on it, so we kind of had to use it. Thank God they fixed that with the X-T3. What even is this? Oh, this is the Canon 77D. We did a review on it. It's a really good vlogging and just general camera, but we don't need it. Oh, the 7D Mark II. I love this camera so much. We used it for wildlife. I still recommend picking up a used copy of this for wildlife. I literally have cobwebs on me. 10 frames per second. The focusing is so good. But then we got the D500 and it didn't have the AA filter, and suddenly all our wildlife shots were a little bit sharper, and it was enough that, I couldn't go back to using it. Oh my god, this is so embarrassing. Do you remember this strap-on camera that I used to use in some videos? Holy crap. I thought that would be such a cool approach to be able to have that first-person view in our videos, and it was 4K, and the Nikon D5600, and I have the D3400 down there. We always do tutorials for these entry-level cameras, but we have pro gear, so we're going to go ahead and use those ourselves. I also have the 5D Mark III, which we're selling for parts because we got caught in a flood in Montana and it wrecked it. Even though it was supposed to be weatherproof, but our little Panasonic GH5 survived that same storm. Oh my god. For a while there, I thought we were going to be like a run and gun crew, and so we got this whole shoulder rig, and Justin would put the camera here, but it just took so long to set up that it just wasn't worth it to us. For YouTube, not the action news. The Sigma 18-35 f1.8, we're keeping one of these that we use in the studio. It's super sharp, but on a DSLR, I just never got reliable autofocus with either Canon or Nikon bodies, so we still manually focus it for a Micro Four Thirds with a speed booster, but unreliable autofocus means no matter how good the lens is, it's not good. Sigma 24-105 f1.4, substantially sharper than the kit lenses that come for Nikon and Canon. Oh my god, the Z Camera E1. We never actually reviewed this, but it was a Micro Four Thirds camera that was supposed to be a GoPro competitor. And at the time, we used GoPros all the time, like in the car, but the color on it was so terrible. It was a new company, and I didn't want to review it slamming the color because then nobody would buy it and the company might fail. And so I just kind of waited for them to release a firmware update that would fix it, and that firmware update never came. And then they just discontinued the camera. Parrot, FlyPad, and drones. I ended up buying a lot of inexpensive drones, a lot of them, for my which drone should I buy video, and the Parrot was the one I ended up actually recommending. It was the best one at a low price point, and that FlyPad made it much easier than trying to use your smartphone. Another copy of the Sigma 24-105. Here's the Sony 85mm f1.8. This is a fantastic lens, but we switched to the Sony 85mm f1.4 because it just handled contrast a little bit better, and it was just a tiny bit faster, but I would be fine with that lens. This is the Sony 50mm f1.8. It's also fine. Oh, this Insta360 Nano. I actually really like the Insta360 One camera that we use now, the One X, but this Insta360 Nano was supposed to go on your smartphone and record 360 video, and I tried it a couple of times and the app just didn't work, and so I just gave up on it. Who cares? Who's gonna like record 360 on their smartphone? The quality wasn't good. The Parrot Anafi. I loved this, and I still haven't made a review of the DJI Mavic 2 Zoom, but that's basically what I'm switching to. I like the Mavic 2 Zoom a little better than the Anafi. The Anafi is lighter and it has USB charging for the battery, so I don't have to travel with a charger, but the reception on the Mavic is so much better. And we were in Norway, and I decided to fly this, and I lost signal up in the fjords, way up high in the mountains, and I could see the drone, but I didn't have decent signal, and it just started blowing away, and I thought it was just literally gonna blow off. And I managed to get signal again, but the Mavic signal is so reliable that I just had to switch. I have not one, but two GoPro Fusion 360 cameras. The first one just fell over and instantly got scratched, and then they told me that they can't replace the lens, so you just have to throw it away. So I just had to buy another one. After I got the second one, I bought the Insta360 One X, which is a better 360 camera, so now we're just getting rid of both of them. Oh, the DJI Osmo. For the longest time, I wanted to get like nice smooth tracking shots, like gimbal shots, and I thought this would be like an approach that would actually work for us, but it was too flaky. I understand software updates made it better later, but it was so unreliable. We just stopped using it, and we have all these accessories for it to try to smooth it out some and make the video quality better, but just didn't work well enough. If you walked, it didn't have a Z-axis, so it would end up just bouncing up and down as you walked, like it couldn't stabilize that. Here we have a bunch of drones. I have not one, but two Sparks. The Spark is not a great drone, but when it first came out, it was absolutely awful. DJI just shipped it too early and it was super buggy, and we were like the only reviewers who actually called out how buggy it was. And DJI hasn't sent us any new early loaners since. Doesn't matter, we're willing to sacrifice relationships with manufacturers in order to be honest with you, and the Spark really needed some honesty. Those gestures did not work at first. The Mavic Air was much better. That's a very good drone, something I really like, but we have the Mavic 2 Zoom now, and so I'm not going to use it. And this big box down here is the DJI Inspire 2, a fantastic drone that flies so well and can handle so much wind, and it's so steady, and you can put different cameras on it, and I just was so excited about it, but I just never ended up using it. And here's why. It's like worth $3,000 even used. I think it was more like $6,000 new, and I was always too afraid that I would crash it and just lose everything. But then I did side-by-side tests with the Phantom 4 Pro, and the Phantom 4 Pro's video was pretty much the same, and the Phantom was quieter and less expensive, didn't draw as much attention to me. The Inspire has mostly stayed there gathering dust. Do you have gear that's gathering dust that you could turn into money? Or do you want to buy some of my used gear, or find really good prices on gear that has been professionally checked out and backed up by the best people in the industry? Then check out KEH.com. They buy and sell used gear, new stuff, old stuff, lots of collectible film stuff. Go there and check it out. Thanks for sponsoring us, KEH, and thanks for buying all this stuff and making it so much easier than it would have been dealing with eBay and Craigslist. If you just want to get super mad because I didn't love some piece of gear that you own, go ahead and write a comment down below. Don't forget to click like, subscribe for gear reviews, actual photography tutorials, and thanks again to our sponsor, KEH. Bye.